All right. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Selamat sejahtera, selamat pagi. Salam Malaysia Madani, salam Lestari, and also salam Shawwal. Welcome to UM Satellite Event 1, the role of sustainable finance in the transition to green campus. And this event is actually part of the National Climate Governance Summit with the theme for this year in 2025, Transition Finance, the foundation of the transition economy. And we are here live from University Malaya. And today we have two panelists and also one moderator from University Malaya. So I'll briefly introduce you to the speakers and moderator, just briefly, in short. Okay. All right. Before we proceed with the event of the day, please allow me, it is an honor for me to introduce the team behind this webinar, uh, which is UM Sustainable Development Center, or in short, UMSDC, or we will also call Pusat Pembangunan Lestari Universiti Malaya. And our vision is actually to transform UM into a model city campus that embodies an advanced green, low carbon, and sustainable practices, lifestyle solutions. So, in order for us to work towards that vision, we have these three missions. One is to walk the talk, on which we have all these policies, advocacies, and so on which number one is to work towards the alignment with 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, SDG. Number two is 2050 net zero target, and also ESG best practices. And then number two is more on research, which is innovation and action. So we are part of the what part of our mandate is actually to play a role as a research management center for our internal living lab grant. So we coordinate and support translational and action-oriented solutions uh, research towards a green, low carbon, and sustainable campus society. And last but not least, actually be inspired our living mantra on which we are responsible to promote and enhance our sustainability intelligence of the campus community on low carbon and sustainable practices and lifestyle. So those are a brief introduction about the team behind the scene, which is working very hard for this webinar. And we would like to take this opportunity to thank the main organizer of this event, which is one is Climate Governance Malaysia, yang berbahagia Datin Sri Sunita Rajakumar, the founder and chairperson of Climate Governance Malaysia, and also the university network partner, which is Alam, Amanah Lestari Alam, dedicated to Puan Wan Faizah Cik Din, the CEO of Alam, for inviting UM to be part of this for the third year of this satellite event. And we would like to recap the first previous two event that we successfully hosted by UM, on which UM is actually the pioneer for the satellite event for NCGS back in 2023. The first one is on forum we call the Climate Risk and Governance in Malaysia, broadening our horizon. So this event was energized by the team from Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, supported by UMSDC. That is much more on race and governance. And then the event number two back last year, we were energized by the team from Faculty of Languages and Linguistics, on which we have the forum, The Power of Language, Urgency and Effective Communication in Addressing Climate Crisis. So, but this year, we will bring you two events. One is the one that we're going to have here today, which is on the role of sustainable finance in transition to green campus. We have moderator Mr. Muhammad Aqmal Zullif bin Abdul Mutallif with us, and joined by our two speakers, Dr. Elayaraja from Faculty of Business and Economics, and Dr. Fong Saun from Institute for Advanced Studies, and also members of UMSDC. And also, we would like to cordially invite you to join us as well tomorrow. If you are available, you're most welcome to attend it physically at the Faculty of Medicine, Faculty Room 5th floor, Faculty of Medicine. Or if you are not able to join us physically, please join us on YouTube channel UMSD Malaya. Very interesting topic on greening healthcare, building a culture of sustainability in healthcare. So we have For eminent speakers, one is Prof. Shireen, the head of the Green at UM Health. And then number two, we have Professor Dr. Nazira, the director herself from University of Malaya Medical Center, PPUM or UMMC. And we have industry collaborators and speaker, Mr. Graham Rice, the Vice President for Sustainability, BBRON Malaysia, which is healthcare related industry. And then last but not least, but very important key person, the speaker is Professor Dr. Yang Farida, the Dean of the Faculty of Medicine herself, will be joining us tomorrow. Okay, so without further ado, I would like to briefly introduce Mr. Aqmal Zullif, the moderator of the day. He's actually the postgraduate student from Faculty of Business and Economics and former intern of the UMSDC, and he's also the author of the Leveraging Sustainable Finance for Institute for Higher Learning discussion paper published early this year. So without further delay, I hand it over to you, Akmal.
Right. Thank you so much, Encik Fadil, for that kind introduction. And good morning to to all our participants today, joining us for this important panel discussion. So before we get into the panel discussion itself on the role of social finance in the transition to green campus, let me provide you guys with a little bit of a recap presentation on the discussion paper that was recently published. Right. So I hope everybody can see my screen. Okay, so let's get into a little bit of a recap on the discussion paper itself. So first of all, let me provide a bit of a background in terms of the paper itself. So we know that the Ministry of Higher Education has mandated public universities to implement ESG policies, aligning with their 2030 agenda for sustainable development. However, this is a challenge for public universities as they are relying on government funding, which limits their financial autonomy, slowing their adaptation to external changes, as well as strategic resource allocations to achieve this sustainable development. At the same time, within the Malaysian education blueprint, it is highlighted that a key strategic measure is for public universities to be financially independent. So there is a question of where is the funding going to come from then for this sustainable development. Now we know that there is a global commitment from COP29 to mobilize 1.3 trillion US dollars to developing countries for sustainable development. And within Malaysia itself, we see our local banks already committing, for example, Maybank 80 billion of sustainable financing by 2025, and in CIMB 100 billion in sustainable financing targeted for 2024. Again, when we look in the Malaysian space for sustainable finance, there are two prominent debt instruments. So the first one is a green sukuk. So just a brief definition of green sukuk, it is a debt instrument that is Sharia compliant, that is for projects that meet environmental objectives. And then there's also social bonds, which are debt instruments for projects that contribute to social objectives. So think of, for example, affordable housing, and maybe for the green sukuk, a solar plant. Those are the projects that will be eligible to receive financing under these two prominent instruments in Malaysia. Now, cumulatively, we've seen particularly the SRA Sukuk grow since its first issuance in 2015. I think as of 2024, it's reached 31.27 billion ringgit of Sukuk issuance covering green, social, and sustainability projects. So that kind of gives us a perspective on sustainable finance in Malaysia and sort of the problem that we're facing here for universities. So if I can just go to the next slide. Right. So in the paper, we find that this is the problem statement that we want to try and solve. There is this need to fund sustainable activities independent from the government. And this has been covered in terms of, for example, Universiti Malaya's commitment to sustainability within those frameworks you can see here on the screen, as well as in terms of becoming more financially independent and reducing government reliance within the UM Transformation Plan, as well as in the most recent annual report released. So one paper that we can look to that provides a solution is by the International Islamic University of Malaysia, where they found that green and social bond as well as sukuk is a solution to continue sustainable development while also being financially independent. Now, a few advantageous factors were identified in the paper for this instrument. So firstly, quite obviously, these funds are from private funds, therefore reducing the government reliance. And again, because most sustainable debt instruments, one of the most advantageous part of them is that they have a lower borrowing cost if the particular project meets the green or social key performance indicators. So for example, if the project successfully provides affordable housing, then the repayment term is lowered. Next, on the repayment term as well. Usually these bond instruments are usually for 10 years or longer. So in that case, they have a longer repayment term and also more flexible financing volume. And lastly, these instruments were found to provide the universities a bit more credit capacity for traditional debt instruments for future borrowings. So they wouldn't be too restricted to just sustainable instruments in this case. And the paper itself also proposes the SRI Sukuk framework as something that universities could leverage on in order to receive sustainable financing so that they can proceed with their transition to a more green campus, for example. Now, within the paper, to further elucidate how sustainable finance can be leveraged, we looked to successful case studies. So the first one that we looked into was the National University of Singapore's Green Finance Framework. So within it, the National University of Singapore, or NUS, successfully raised green bonds to finance their green buildings and facilities, both a new building as well as old buildings, where they had leverage on their own finance framework as well as the International Capital Market Association Green Bond Principles. So from this case study, we see that they were actually receive a AAA rating by Moody's, which basically means they had received the highest rating for their green bonds. And they attribute this to one, their stature itself as the National University of Singapore, but also in terms of going beyond standard metrics. So for example, the buildings, they don't only look into the energy efficiency, but also into holistic indicators such as does it give peace of mind for their students by including green spaces. And this is very important in terms of its success by not only using international standards such as the Aqmal Green Bond Principles, having their own comprehensive green finance framework, but also going beyond and including these holistic indicators. The next case study that we looked into was the Stanford University Sustainability Bond. Now for this, they had secured sustainability bonds. So sustainability bonds are debt instruments that are dedicated to projects that meet both environmental and social objectives. So for in this case, Stanford had actually identified that they had a social obligation to improve participation from the marginalized community, particularly to improve health equity research. At the same time, they also needed to provide affordable housing for their students. So both of these areas had environmental factors such as for the housing being more energy efficient, being more sustainable with the resource use, but also in terms of the social objective of improving participation of marginalized community. So they found an opportunity to receive financing by advancing social and environmental objectives. And for Stanford's case, they had similarly also referred to ICMA standard, but they also referred to the Climate Bond Initiative standards to build more robust criteria for their projects. Now, the last case study that we looked at where sustainable finance was successfully leveraged was Khazanah's Insan SRI Sukuk, which again is the first Sukuk that was issued in Malaysia. Now, they had leveraged on the local Securities Commission Malaysia's Social Responsible Investment, or SRI, investment Sukuk framework. And from this, they had successfully secured an SRI Sukuk, which again is a Sharia compliant debt instrument that is for social or environmental objectives. And within this case, it was to enhance trust school programs. And they had actually received a nominal waiver of the repayment because of successfully achieving the particular KPI. So again, this shows the advantage of these debt instruments of being low in cost by achieving the positive social or environmental impact. Now, from these case studies, we then try and draw on what are we doing within Universiti Malaya. So there is a draft Net Zero Blueprint in the works, and within it, there are several action plans listed to help Universiti Malaya transition to be more sustainable. And what we did was we compared it with the two standards from the most prominent debt instruments, sustainable debt instruments in Malaysia, which is again is the Sukuk and the social bonds. So for those two particular instruments, we refer to the SRI Sukuk framework by Securities Commission Malaysia and the ASEAN Green Social Sustainability Bond Standards. And within these frameworks, we can see the identify or eligible projects that would be applicable for these frameworks to receive these financing. And we see that the action plans within the draft Net Zero Blueprint is actually aligned to the activities identified within the framework, which shows that there is a possibility of the action plans that UM has planned to actually be eligible under those frameworks. Now, to take it to another step, we then try and implement a similar framework that NUS had, which includes 4 features. So for this, we took one particular action plan from the draft Net Zero Blueprint and see how could that work within the framework that NUS has proposed. And this is actually a framework that can be seen in the ASEAN GSS bond standard, as well as the SRI Sukuk framework. So the first feature is the use of proceed, which means just to define the eligibility criteria for the green projects. So as we've seen, the activity is identifiable within the ASEAN GSS bond standard as well as the SRI Sukuk framework. And in addition to that, we can also rely on regional frameworks such as the ASEAN taxonomy to build more robustness in the criteria to ensure that the project is eligible and actually sustainable. The second feature is in terms of the process for project evaluation and selection. So here we need to set a rigorous process that the project must meet. And again, we draw on from the NUS Green Finance Framework, and we set up this process that would have to involve not only key parties within the university, but third-party verifiers and external experts as well. So the process will start with project identification to project evaluation and selection, which may include a panel, then to senior management approvals, and lastly to create a green project register to track what projects are currently being allocated and how it's progress of this project, as well as annual reviews to make sure that everything is in line with the overall plan of the university and the financiers. The third feature is the management of proceeds. So here we want to set up how proceeds are managed and who is responsible to managing the proceeds. So in we can identify the UM bursary to periodically monitor the balance of track proceeds, if any is unallocated. And lastly, in terms of reporting, we would have to set reporting requirement for the approved projects. It is recommended within the frameworks to do annual reporting, so we take that precedence to annual reporting of the sukuk and bonds issued, as well as in terms of the performance indicators and the impact reports to use both quantitative and qualitative indicators. So in the paper, we actually do this framework for 2 action plans. So we already covered one there with the installation of renewable energy. But another action plan that we can see also work is for the electric vehicles for internal trips within the campus. And within here, we can see how this particular action plan can be assessed and identified within this framework that draws from the NUS as well as the 2 standards in Malaysia. Now, another thing that we did was we sought out feedback from key stakeholders on their idea of if sustainable finance could be leveraged by UM and for universities in general. So some of the feedback that we received was that the proposed framework that presented in the previous slide does align with their expectation, particularly because they do rely on those guidelines, SRI Sukuk and ASEAN GSS. But they also recommended if financing was sought from global financial institution, then international standards will also need to be leveraged. So in this case, it would probably be one of maybe Aqmal or CBI's bond standards. The next feedback that we received was that universities, particularly public universities, do face regulatory barriers to access debt financing. However, that they could still leverage and structure sustainable finance instrument through their private holdings. So for example, through UM holdings. And they did mention and cite that there was one successful case of this happening in Malaysia. The third feedback that stakeholders gave was that they suggested that developing the sustainable framework was the right first step. But at the same time, they suggested to involve key parties within the process itself. So this could include third-party verifiers, the financial institution that will seek financing from itself, as well as regulatory bodies. The fourth feedback that we received from stakeholders is kind of they highlighted 3 main factors for the success of universities to receive sustainable finance, which include debt servicing capacity. So debt service capacity here refers to is the university able to meet the repayment terms? Next, the financial standing. Is the university already full on debt? Can they take on more debt? And lastly, the university's ambition itself. So a stakeholder highlighted how sustainable financing at the time, because it's still quite nascent, it's still quite modest in terms of financial benefit, which might not be too advantageous when you compare with other forms of financing. However, it had provided strong environmental signaling to its stakeholders, but also, for example, for fellow universities out there in terms of setting a precedent to follow with using sustainable finance. Again, as universities are test beds for innovation, it would help set out how sustainable finance could be leveraged for not only universities but other institutions such as maybe public institutions as well as private enterprises as well. Next, stakeholders also suggested looking into other financing models, for example, joint ventures. So universities could partner with a private company to take on specific action plans. For example, to modernize the university's energy system, they could partner with an energy company. And then lastly, stakeholders also emphasize that in truth, the transition to be sustainable is very costly. So there would still need to be some financial grants that need to be looked into or specified for universities. So from this feedback, and also the case studies, we can come up with sort of 3 recommendations from this case paper. So the first one is that there needs to be a sustainable finance framework established as a first step so that we are able to identify how can these sustainable projects be viable. Next is to form a steering group to advance sustainable finance initiative. So again, due to the nascent nature of sustainable finance, there's still a lot of research that's needed to see how different models could work, as well as to advance in terms of involving more stakeholders to be aware of this need for sustainable financing for universities. Next, the last recommendation is again to explore that variety of financing mechanisms, for example, joint venture or other business models that could work for universities. So that wraps up the presentation and recap for the discussion paper. And without further ado, we'll now move on to the panel discussion part of our discussion. So I'm happy that we have 2 lecturers from today who can give us more input into our panel discussion on the role of sustainable finance in the transition to a green campus. So first, I will start with, again, we have Dr. Fong and Dr. Elayaraja today on the call. So we'll start with Dr. Fong. So we understand that sustainable finance is sort of an enabler for sustainability efforts. But maybe it's best for us to first understand the importance of sustainability efforts and the transition to green campus itself. So maybe we can take from a more micro perspective, from UM's perspective, if Dr. Fong, if you could share what are the key sustainability goals aims to achieve, and what is the importance of meeting these goals?
Okay, thank you, Aqmal, and good morning, everyone. So at Universiti Malaya, our sustainability goals is a part of a long-term commitment to environmental leadership, institutional resilience, and also inclusive development. So this would also include achieving net zero emissions. And we have clearly stated that we want to do it by 2050 in line with national ambitions. So we also want to, as shared by Fadli and also Aqmal in the earlier sessions, earlier part of this session, we are walking the talk. The way that we are doing it is through embedding the sustainability into every level of campus life, from the very top governance all the way to infrastructure, to research, and to student experience. So that's how we infuse sustainability and embracing it as part of the long-term commitment. So we also position the campus that we have here as a living lab to pilot and scale innovative sustainability solutions. So it's an interesting case study for Universiti Malaya because we are situated in between Kuala Lumpur and also Petaling Jaya. We are sitting in the middle of it. So part of the urbanization problems that are faced in these 2 vicinities are also part of things that we are actually currently testing out solutions through our living labs in Universiti Malaya. So what I would like to say here is that these goals are not just aspirational, they are necessary. So as Malaysia's premier research university, also carries the responsibility in the sense that we need to model solutions aligned with national and global sustainability agendas. So achieving these targets is essential for both our future relevance and also for our immediate impact on the communities that we serve. So in our case is how are we actually supporting the sustainable development in the Kuala Lumpur region as well as in the Petaling Jaya. And of course, the work that we have completed, or I would say is ongoing, also reach further regions beyond these 2 places that I've mentioned. So at our center, at the UMSDC, I'm proud to say that this center plays a vital role in driving these efforts because we function as a catalyst where we facilitate the interdisciplinary research, we coordinate campus-wide initiative, and we generate policies, recommendations, and connect UM's effort to global frameworks such as the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal and as well as the Planetary Health Agenda. So that's more or less what we are actually covering in Universiti Malaya.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Fong, for that. And again, it's a very wide view that UM has, again, from infrastructure to student experience. So maybe, again, as you've touched on as well, UMSDC has a lot of work in this area. And even in the paper itself, we acknowledge that there are few blueprints already out there that UM has put out. So maybe if we could just elaborate a little bit on some of these blueprints that UM has, as well as how does this actually contribute to the sustainability goal that you've described just now.
Okay, certainly. So maybe while I'm at that, let me just quickly share my screen so that everyone can take a closer look. So basically, these are the three. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So we have three plans here. So the UM master plan. I will talk about the UM master plans in the next slide, but I will start off with the UM Eco Campus Blueprint, and this is coordinated by UMSDC. So what basically this blueprint is that it outlines the practical pathway for sustainable operations in the sense that how we can relate KPIs covering waste management, water conservation, green procurement, and also behavior change. And so these are the 8 key items that we are focusing on when it comes to eco campus management. So the second key documents that we have under UMSDC is the UM sustainability policy. So this policy institutionalized sustainability as a core university value. So embedding it through teaching, through research, through operations and partnerships. So in this policy itself, we clearly spell out what kind of efforts that we have in Universiti Malaya itself and how does it link to the overall broader goals of these 17 SDGs. So of course we have like what Aqmal mentioned just now, we are also looking at the net zero blueprint. I think we'll be able to share that very soon. And it does clearly lines out our strategic action plans on how can we achieve carbon neutral by 2030 and net zero by 2050. So that's the end goal here that we are trying to achieve. So in terms of master plan, we have also this master plan blueprint of 2050. So basically this UM master plan integrates sustainability into physical development. So we have also think about creating turning the whole Universiti Malaya campus into a smart campus. And by having this master plan here, we are able to carve out what are the exact things that we need to achieve. So in this physical development planning, we also incorporate green spaces, walkability, energy efficiency, and biodiversity corridors as part of the considerations when we are planning out this UM master plan and how we envision UM to look like in 2050. So it's not that far away in terms of time frame. So a lot of exciting things are actually currently on the way, and it's we are eager to show everyone what we have in plan. So together these frameworks reflect our integrated approach, one that aligns with the low carbon cities framework. It also match with the national climate change policy and the broader Malaysian Madani vision. So if you're interested to know more about all these documents, you can actually head to our website at sustainability.um.edu.my to have a closer look at all this document. Yeah. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Fong. I think it's very interesting to hear that UM does have a lot of things in the works to achieve all the sustainability goals that you've raised there. But maybe from Dr. Elia, if you could just hear now, we also understand that Malaysia has set out its national policy to transition to a low carbon economy under the National Climate Change Policy 2.0. And I think Dr. Fong briefly mentioned that the plans are aligned between UM and what the national plan is. But maybe for, in general, what are the key initiatives that universities should be aware of in Malaysia to be aligned with this policy? Sorry, Dr. Lia, I think you're muted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Aqmal. Good morning to everyone. As my expertise in data science and AI, I've recently diving into the Malaysian National Climate Policy, which is 2.0, and I wanted to share a few thoughts on how it affects universities, and more importantly, how as we are academic and tax back, okay, can really make a difference in driving the low carbon transitions. Okay, actually there is a 5 main areas, okay, where I believe universities really lead the change. Okay, for example, um, uh, the key, which is the key, is that treat our campuses as a living laboratories, okay, place where we just don't uh, teach the sustainability, but actually to test it, we model it, and then we scale it, all right, in the real world problems. Okay, with the smart IoT sensors. Okay, the IoT sensors is and machine learning models. Usually, that what we are in keen to look into the aspects. Okay, we can now track the campus energy use in a real time basis. Okay, write down the metric like building energy intensities, like we call it as a BEI. Okay, that's one of the tools like we use in order to observe that, how efficient we're using as the electricities and so on. And definitely this will help us to understand where the wasting powers and how we can optimize the things like a solar panel output, or predict the ROI, no return of investments, for the renewable energy and projects. And to give the sense of the scale, okay, use, I think it's around like 71.4 million kilowatt hours electricity in 2023, right? That is huge baselines we have from our start modeling, reductions in line with the NCCP 2.0. And we target of around 30 to 50% of emission cuts. Yeah. So we can build that automated, okay, the carbon tracking systems, which is like there is a scope 1, 2, and 3, which is emission all the measures of dynamic dashboards. And definitely it makes managing and reporting our carbon footprint much easier and more efficient, and it's transparent as well. Okay, now let's move on the mobility. Okay, because of traffics, as annoying as it is, and everyone knows, and also it's like contribute significant to the campus emissions. Okay, but now is already like piloting an AI traffic based AI based traffic monitoring systems, and with the real time data from the EV shuttle buses, and we can optimize the routes, reduce the idle times, and then we potentially cut the transport emission by around 20%, something like that. Yeah. So, but where we don't stop here, and we also like use graph theory, okay, based on the tech and mathematical model we have to create a small ride sharing networks. All right. So this is really encouraging the carpooling and reducing a single passenger's car use. Okay. And it's a small shift that can be a big impact actually. Right. Anyway, we started anyway. Okay. Now third is we talk about waste. This is very important. Okay. Waste management. It's like there is a lot of we can do analyzing our waste streams, like using like in machine learning. We use the k-mean clusterings on waste data. For example, we can find the patterns, and then we can find the inefficiencies. Okay, and then we design the better way to reduce, reuse, and recycle of this. Okay, in 2023, so the waste data could help to prioritize the bioplastics, improvising the compositions, and as well as even push towards a more circular economy. And if it is introduced that blockchain, which is we can track to recycle the materials through the supply chain, which is ensuring full transparency, and the compliance with the eco efficiency target set out in NCCP 2.0. Okay. Okay. Next will be on finance. Okay. But to be honest, all right, sustainability needs funding. Okay, sustainability needs funding. So we have using Monte Carlo simulation. Yes, we're going to use the Monte Carlo simulation to model that the financial performance of the project like a green sukuk. Okay, so we use that like Monte Carlos. These tools help us to estimate the risk of the returns. For example, say we follow the model like a Kazana Isan Sukuk. Okay, we could see that the potential return around 6.22%. Okay, so 22%, which is really like promising, like encouraging, like you when you look into it, and there is a great benchmark out there. Okay, as I said earlier, so like for example, National University Singapore issued a 940 millions, okay, 940 millions green bond for their net zero projects. Okay, and it works. It works with these time series models. Okay, we can explore blended finance mechanisms, which is combining the public funding with the private investment like Maybank, CIMB banks, okay, towards the sustainable finance. Okay, so included that. Okay, the last but not least on the climate education and behavior. Okay, so we using a natural language processing is one of the machine learning techniques, right, to analyze the feedbacks from staff and students, like responses we get from the sustainability challenges. Okay, so this is really help us to see that what's working on and which is not. Okay, and how the people are really engaging with these climate programs, and we can even connect with those dots between the climate causes enrollments and the actual data, basically. Okay, um, in reduction in energy use and transport emissions, maybe to help the fine tunes, okay, our co-curriculum for the real impacts. Okay, so where is the AI, IoT, blockchain, or predictions finance? There are many ways we can contribute to these transitions, actually. All right, and the best place to start. Okay, so there's the question marks. So right here on our own campuses, so we treat our universities are living and breathable ecosystem for innovations, and we can test and learn and scale solutions that the support not just to NCCP 2.0, but Malaysia broader sustainable development goals by 2030s. Okay, the future is already here. Okay, and we just need to step up and connect the dots, as I said earlier, and take action together. Yeah.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Elia. I think that's very insightful in terms of the different areas that universities could leverage. Again, technology, time risk models in terms of solving and finding the opportunity within different kind of financing mechanisms. There's all very important and interesting things that universities would need to be aware of. But maybe now we can move to, if you could share based on your reading of the policy, the National Climate Change Policy, as well as so far what's been presented in terms of what UM wants to achieve. Could you share maybe just the challenges and opportunities that institutions face in transitioning, and what are the success factors to meet the planned sustainability policies?
Okay, we start with the challenges. Okay, straight away. Okay, first off, the fundings. Okay, the funding issues. The like many other universities, like it's really rely on the government support. Like in 2022, so nearly like half of its income come from the government grants. That's a fact. All right, cannot be changed. So that makes it like really hard to commit to big sustainability projects like installing solar panels across the campus or switching to the electric shuttles. So to add that, okay, our electricity bills alone last year was like around 37 millions. Okay, itself. So that's big numbers, and there is a big pressures. right? So the data fragmentations, we actually have a lot of good data like energy, water, transport. So economy anyway. So for example, in 2023, right, UM used around like 71.4 millions of kilowatt electricities, and then 2.88 million cubic waters, meters of waters. All right, but the problems, these data sets are scattered across the different systems. They don't talk to each others, which makes nearly impossible to build that real-time dashboard to track that our net zero journey. And finally, the technical regulations hurdles. Okay, the things like structuring a grand sukuk or aligning with that Asian taxonomy require very specific expertise. And honestly, uh, we are still building that setup. So the project like the renewable energy framework sometimes move slower than we expected, right? So, but there is a good news. Okay, there is a good news. The opportunities just as real. Okay, let's talk about the sustainability finance. Exploring 60 million solar energy projects, and we are looking into a funding it's through that SRI compliance sukuks. We took the inspiration from that NUS Singapore, as I mentioned, and the green bond to the fund their zeros initiative, and it works. Okay, plus banks like Maybank and CMB banks have committed around 80 billions and 100 billions towards the green finance. So if we can tap into it, that blended finance model, so we can make the big projects more doable. Okay, so where I get excited in this project is power of data. Okay, as we are expert in machine learning, so this is like only the way we look into it, how it's a power that data power is works. Okay, is piloting the AI-based traffic monitoring system that potentially cut the shuttle's emission by 20%. Okay, and we are running Monte Carlo's simulation, as I said earlier, to assess the financial returns of the green circuit. So one of our models based on Kazana's Isansuku predicts returns around 6.22. Right, this kind of insight help the shift sustainability from being a nice to have and something strategic and financially sounded. Okay, and it doesn't stop there. Okay, to be honest, it doesn't stop there. Our waste management system are also ripe for the innovations using the cluster algorithm, like I said earlier, k-means, okay, hierarchy clusters and so on. So we can analyze the waste data and identify the composting hotspots, prioritize the use of the bioplastics. So our goal, okay, our goals, question marks, divert at least 30% of the waste from that landfills. And if we bring the blockchain into the pictures, so we can recycle more, transparent and traceable perfect for the meeting echoes, efficiency targets. Okay, so what's going to make all of this works? Okay, that's the primary questions here. Okay, now it start with the cross sectors partnerships, like the proposed, the and TNB solar farms. Okay, so that is a really the potential areas when we go look into it. So public, private, and collaborations help shares the risk and scale the impact. So we also need to keep that investing in the climate educations program, like Eco Campus Management, really empowering the students to make the lead. And then we have already seeing a real result, like up to 20% from emission reductions, to link to the students driver initiative. Okay, so here my thoughts, we need to stop thinking of the sustainability as something extra. Okay, we need to see that our campuses as the data rich ecosystems where finance policy and the tech and all come together. Okay, so if we unlock the power of data, so leverage green finance and work hand in hand with the industry. So we won't just meet the goal of NCCP 2.0, but we will helping to lead the Malaysia chain charge towards the 2030 sustainability development goals, like we call as SSD. Okay, yeah. So that is my thought actually.
Right, right. Thank you, Dr. Leah. And I think it's very important that you raise data. I think data is very pertinent in terms of not only measuring where we need to go, but also in terms of seeing, the gaps of what actually needs to be implemented and what is lacking in terms of our sustainability performance. And again, it does also translate to, the financing need, because in order to receive financing, you need to prove that, you can actually achieve the sustainability goals, and you obviously need the data to validate that you'll actually achieve the particular KPI achievements, for example. And I think, going on again, as you highlighted, financing is a challenge in order to meet these sustainability policies. And we've seen from the recent discussions at COP29, which is the World Summit on sustainability issues, world leaders, decision makers, and private sector organizations all found that mobilizing funds was necessary to viably address climate change. And even within our paper, we also find that there's an added complexity for universities. We already know we need financing, but public universities are also dependent on government funding. So models such as the ones that Dr. Elayaraja raised about blended financing, maybe mixing private and government funding, is maybe something that can be looked into, but it's definitely an issue for public universities, as there is both goals of being financially independent, or at least reducing government reliance, as well as achieving the sustainable development needed for the campus to be more carbon neutral or becoming green. So maybe Dr. Fong, just on this note, if you could share, how have universities financed their sustainability effort? As you shared that there's a couple that's in blueprints already, as well as what sustainability financing mechanisms are being looked to support universities' decarbonization efforts.
Okay. To start with, I would really like to echo what Dr. Elayaraja have covered, because basically, I think all of us get the idea that how dependent is public universities on government funding. So in that sense, financing the sustainability transition will always be a major challenge for public universities, because traditionally, most sustainability efforts within have been funded through operational grants or even research funds, like what UMSDC is doing. But of course, these are very limited in scale and scope. So I'll give you an example, because so my role in UMSDC is actually to oversee research grant and also research funding to support living labs that are meant to accelerate carbon neutrality. But in my capacity, or in UMSDC's capacity, we are only able to fund projects on a yearly basis. So immediately that caused some downsides in carrying out actual impact, because projects, especially those that are related to sustainable development, doesn't happen overnight. It will require a lot of time. So that's the first kind of constrictions that we have. So what we do in UMSDC is that we are also currently in the works of looking into more strategic financing model. So for example, we are exploring public-private partnership, PPP. So for energy projects like solar installations, we are also currently in the talk of actually securing this public-private partnership for biodiversity conservation involving our forest reserve, which is Rimba Ilmu. So that's also currently on the way. So other than that, I think like what you have mentioned, Aqmal, we are also currently looking into the possibility of doing green sukuk, or even sustainability linked grants, or even sometime down the road, I believe we will also be interested to look into carbon offset partnership. So those are some of the possible financing model that we can actually take a look into. And the idea here is that the vision here is that will serve as a test bed. And as you have mentioned earlier in the paper, because is able to help demonstrate how this sustainable finance can be adapted to a higher education context. We can take the lead as usual. And we are also drafting this a proposed sustainable finance framework that would help guide Universiti Malaya, in the sense that possibly other institutions as well. So by doing so, we can explore what kind of tools that would work in a way that is ethical, it's practical, and also aligned with national priorities. So that's more or less how UMSDC or I would say as a whole is looking at how we can finance our sustainability efforts.
Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Fong. I think it's good that you highlight a lot of the advantages that universities have to receive financing for certain projects. For example, in there is a large amount of green area. So obviously, the public-private partnership could highlight on that in terms of the biodiversity restoration or in terms of carbon sequestration projects, for example. So again, we're looking at the advantages of universities, not even just but most public universities in Malaysia have large green areas, for example, and also that potential of a solar farm, for example, not only for the university but maybe for the grid around the university itself. So there's a lot of advantages that you've highlighted that universities can leverage on. But it's also important for us to kind of understand what challenges there are. So maybe Dr. Fong, you could also share what challenges you foresee universities in financing their sustainability initiative through some of the mechanisms that you've shared.
Okay. To me, I think the biggest challenge here is that the sustainable finance is still nascent in Malaysian higher education landscape. So I think that's the biggest challenge that we are facing. So, and I also echo what Dr. Elayaraja mentioned earlier, which is on the limited technical expertise that we have, and also the administrative capacity. We are definitely lacking in that sense on how we can come up with a proper design and how we can manage all these instruments if we are going to go into this sustainable financing region. So, and there's also this problem with perceived complexity and risk involved. Because sustainability projects, like I mentioned earlier, it often spend long time spans. It spent long time frames, and we are not talking about 1 or 2 years. We are talking about 5, and in fact, to certain projects, it might even take 10 to 20 years. So just to perhaps also to share what would be the success story of Rimba Ilmu. So Rimba Ilmu is our forest of knowledge, where it's a botanical garden meant for conservation of species, and also it's meant for research purposes, of course. So Rimba Ilmu is actually a secondary forest. Previously, about, I think in the 1950s, 1960s or 1970s, around that time. So it was actually a rubber forest. And then it was gazetted as a reserve forest, and they allow a lot of native species to grow naturally. So currently that small space is actually hosting about 1,600 plus species. And that's huge because considering how small it is. And the effort for these secondary forests to grow into how it is now, currently it takes over 20 years. So I hope by giving you that sort of context, it really does prohibit the sort of opportunity, or I would say the advantage when you go to stakeholders and ask them for funding, because immediately they will talk about ROI. How soon can you give me X amount of profitability at the end of the day? So I think this is also what constitutes the difficulties in actually pushing this forward. So, and of course, it involves multi-sector collaboration. It's not just about two partners. It's beyond that. If you look closely into how ecosystem services provides benefits to all the people, it cuts across. There's no specific, and I would tell you it's more than even 4 or 5 stakeholders on the table. So all in all, this makes it very difficult to align traditional university budgeting cycles or rigid procurement rules to a sustainable finance. So, but still, these are also exactly the reasons why universities should lead the way, because by experimenting, gathering evidence, and helping shape policies, this is sort of the main role that SDC envisions. How we can actually be a action research platform that connects sustainable finance theory with real-world campus transformation. So perhaps before I pass it to you, I would also just like to highlight here that naturally universities are not non-profit organizations, so they are not able to raise sustainable debt. However, it may, in certain conditions, universities can consider to leverage this sort of mechanism through its private arm. And as you suggested in your presentation earlier, we have Holdings to do so. So it's important. I think it's also very feasible for us to look into the possibilities to explore this practicability so that we can benefit a wider application across businesses and also other institutions as well. Right. Back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fong. And I think I echo your note that again, social finance is very nascent. But I think as universities and research institutions, this is a very maybe trending or hot topic that could be looked into and researched on further to look into what models can work and what models can't work, right? And I think again, like you mentioned, that public-private partnership, that's something that's also very viable to look into, particularly because maybe traditional forms of financing is not as easy because again, these projects are a bit more long term. So the lifetime of the project is something that also needs to be considered, because if it's set into a shorter time frame, then there's not enough success indicators from that particular project that you could prove to the financial institution as being eligible enough for you to receive the financing. So I think again, lifetime of the project is important to consider, and again to look into public-private partnerships as well, and the role of universities as research institutions to advance knowledge on sustainable finance. Thank you again, Dr. Fong. But maybe from Dr. Ella, if you could hear from a larger or more macro perspective, what is the view on sustainable finance instruments such as green bonds and sukuk, and what are the mechanisms available to accelerate sustainable finance efforts? Sorry, Dr. Ella, you're muted.
You can hear me?
Yep.
Okay. All right. At UM, okay, thank you for the question. So if you look at that UM, we have been running our own model, as I said earlier. We use the Monte Carlos, okay, and we see that the return of investment as well is really promising, and that's promising, and how the sustainability doesn't make environmentally sense, but it makes the financial sense too. So if you can see the beauty of the sukuk that we have here, they are Sharia compliance, right? Sharia compliance, which makes them perfectly aligned with the Malaysian financial regulations under the security commissions. Okay, and since they follow the globally recognized frameworks like International Capital Market Associations, ICMA, and the ASEAN taxonomy, and they come with the third-party checks to ensure the project are genuinely green and not just a greenwash. So this act, the trust basically, the trust and the credibility, which is essential for attracting the investors. So this is how we get more investors from the Middle East and so on. Okay, and we look at the scalability. Okay, and if you look at the scalability, the pictures is even more promising. Okay, since 2015. Okay, so yeah, 2015. So Malaysia has issued over the 31 billions in sukuk. I think it's around 31 billions in SRS sukuk. And this shows really the market already growing actually. All right. So you can see that obviously based on the data will be not cheap. So it's true. You can see it obviously. And at UN, okay, we have been aligning our net zero strategy with some of the frameworks so that we will position to tap into this funding source, the project like EV shuttle, okay, as said earlier, EV shuttle system, solar farms, and then the other climate friendly initiative. Okay, now how we do speed up this and make it work better? Okay, the answers lies that unified data systems. Okay, back to back. Because I'm a data guy, so I'm back to back. I'm talking about the data. Okay, at we already have a lot of unusual data. Okay, we have plenty of data. Okay, useful data. We have to utilize it. So we can bring all of this data, okay, of the energy, water, transport emissions into that single net zero dashboard. Okay, so even it can be done using a Power BI. Okay, it's doable anyway. So we just bring everything in the dashboard. Okay, and we get the real-time insights. So we can observe in real-time basis, like, okay, how much the water is running at the moment, the consumptions, and how much the electricity is bill, the metric is moving around. Okay, and then we can observe everything in the real-time basis. Okay, and the using the IoT as a sensors, okay, IoT sensors and machine learning, we can monitor the things like building energy, intensities, as I said, and make it smarter and faster decisions to reduce the consumptions. Okay, we are also looking into exploring like blockchain to ensure that the fund are raised, especially through the sukuk. Okay, transparency, and then as well as we can. This will especially important, as Malaysians look forward for the futures where the system like cap and trade for the carbon credits could be in place. That's going to be confirmed. Okay, and next we talk about the predictive financial modeling. Okay, so we have been using tools like Monte Carlo, as I said earlier, to see that the returns of big projects such as our 60 million project solar initiative. Okay, so by benchmarking our result against this NUS green bond, as I said earlier, so we can ensure that our projections are the grounded are real world success. Okay, and this confirms. So we also like using that time series analysis in stats. We are using a time series analysis to explore the blended finance, which is like combinations of the public and private investments. Okay, so we can obviously can say that on exacting possibilities. Okay, I would say that it's a TM, UMTNB, a solar farm join. Okay, the ventures. Okay, I'm sure you're all aware of it. Okay, so this could align perfectly with the banks like May banks who have already like committed 80 billion towards sustainable finance. Okay, all right. The kind of the collaborations, okay, we have is that the upfront cost of the green technology like EV shuttles and the smart grid systems. Okay, but it's not all about the monies and technology. It's all about the people too. Okay, you just be on the mind. So that's why we are using the artificial intelligence AI tools to better connect with the UM communities. Okay, for example, we have started applying a natural language processing, so NLP. So we analyze the feedback from that our staff and students. Okay, so we also like help to understand the working what's that our sustainable program, as I said earlier, and then we also like KIK thematic challenges have had about 30% of the participants rate of so far. Okay, at the moment. So with a better insight, so we can design the more effective programs and boost the participation as well. Okay, in terms of transport, okay, it's one of the crucial. So we are using the graph theory, as I said, and GPS, okay, and to build the smart ride sharing systems, okay, for the our planned EV shuttle trade fleet. And our goal is actually to reduce about around 20% of the carbon emissions. But to achieve this, we need a design and systems based on the real data and real users' behaviors. So I feel that these are the main the funding issues like we have to look into it.
Right, right. Thank you so much, Dr. Elia, for that. I think like you've raised a couple of different data models to make sure or to see how sustainable projects can be more effective. For example, to improve the take up of public transport internal shuttles. But maybe just going back to the discussion paper, from your perspective, is the potential approach within the paper consistent with the global thinking to bridge sustainability gap? Does it make sense, or what can be improved from that potential approach?
Okay, based on the papers, okay, what I can see that what really the stand out to me is how UM is aligning its sustainability effort with the international best practices. For example, they have drawn the inspirations from the successful model like NUS Green Finance frameworks, and they following the global recognized standard such as the International Capital Market Association Green Bonds principles. and the Asian Green Bond Standard as well. Okay, this is important. Okay, this is important because it shows UM think globally. Okay, and not just in terms of local development, but also like positioning itself to be leaders in the sustainable finance and innovation on the global stage. So they're also like doing right things, okay, by focusing on the third-party verifications and like proposing, external auditors to check how the funds from sustainability project are used. A great move, okay, and it mirrored what we are seeing with the EU taxonomy, okay, and this emphasize the principle of do not significant harm, okay, do no significant harms, okay. This level of the transparency is essential to prevent that greenwashing. Sometimes something we were seeing a lot of these days, yeah. Okay, transparency is like this is trust are the key or to moving the sustainability effort towards. Without that, it's impossible. Okay. So another great steps for what it does was like plan to use the blended financial models. So the teaming up with the private companies like Maybank, CIMB banks, and these models like the World Bank has been advocating for like using public-private partnerships to bring the more capital for the sustainable development goals. Okay. Okay. What I find especially promising now, okay, how is making smart of the Islamic finance tools, particularly SRI Sukuk. As the SRI Sukuk, it's a Malaysian, Malaysia has been like, is a leaders in this, the space, and is building their own foundations. They are looking at example like Kazana Isan Sukuk, which is saw return of around, as I said earlier, so 6.22%. This does not only make the financial sense, but they also may meet that the growing demand for the Sharia compliance and ESG aligned investments, which is important to factor for the country financial landscapes. Okay. Additionally, is exploring like WAQF-based sukuk structures, WAQF based sukuk structures. This approach could make financing more community centered, okay, which is tied back to the United Nations emphasize on the localized and then the grassroots driven finance, especially for the developing countries like Malaysia. So this type of innovations could be the game changers for the sustainable finance for our regions. Okay, so right now, okay, I would say that collect a lot of data, like I said, so but this data is all over the places, okay, and sitting in silos, okay. So this missed opportunity. So we could integrate this data using a method like federated learning, okay. We call as a federated learning. So we could securely bring this different data set together and start optimizing our infrastructures in real times, okay. So good example of this, the NUT, okay. So NUT is 9.8 megawatt, solar powers, okay, which use the real data integrated to the optimize the energy use, okay. And this kind of the model we could use look into the scale up the sustainability effort at okay. Okay, now next is our financial side, okay. On the financial side, so we can use tools like, as I said earlier, MCS, so Monte Carlo's tools, to forecast the risk of the return of the major projects. Okay, so like proposed like 60 million project, as I said earlier, right? So we could do that anyway. Okay, and we do the comparisons result. So how it is, how efficient it is. Okay. Next, another area that could be explored is the behavioral analytic. Okay, as we can see into the behavioral side. So this is often overlooked for me. Okay, it's all overlooked in sustainable planning, but it's crucial. Okay, it's crucial. By using these tools like behavioral analytics and so on, like sentiment analysis, for example, on feedbacks from the KIT thematic challenges, we could better understand how the student and staff are responding to the sustainability initiative. And this insight would allow us to, the fine-tune or programs or boost the engagement in participations. And we have seen that approach, work well with the Stanford, okay, and the sustainability bonds initiative has significantly shaped that the behavioral feedbacks, definitely, okay. While you am also on the right track, as I said, there are a few things I would love to see explore more deeply. For one, is a carbon offset, okay, could be the great way to that complement for the UM's proposed that cap and trade system. Okay, okay, just imagine how we can combine this with the blockchain. So we could track the carbon credit with the complete transparency. Okay, and much like pilot happenings in MIT. So it would help definitely help us to meet the traceability requirements under the Article 6, okay, in the Paris agreements. You can see that in the Paris agreements, okay. So another opportunity is for the deeper taxonomy alignments. So you have already like mapping to the Asian taxonomy, which is is a fantastic, okay, but it could take the step further by adopting, okay, the EU more, the EU's more technical screen criteria, okay, and this would be the particularly useful when it's come to the defining the constitutes or substantial contributions to the climate mitigations. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think UM has potential to become a regional leaders in campus-based innovations, and there is no doubt over it. Okay, and already networks like United Nations Sustainability Developments, networks that focus on the campus, the sustainabilities, and UM's connect with these networks. Okay, and it followed that the footsteps for the universities like Thammasat universities in Thailand. Okay, which is turned its campuses into a living climate labs with that rooftop farms. Okay, it's beautiful. If you have a chance to go and see that in the Thammasat universities, and the sustainability projects is really awesome. Okay, yeah, I think these are things like from my side. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much, Atila. And I think it's true that, more international standards could also be looked at, such as the EU taxonomy's technical screening criteria, but also the importance of data and how that would help improve the modeling for example, some of the sustainable finance that could be leveraged. And it's also important to look into, like you say, the common trend now is also in terms of carbon trade. So the cap and trade system is also something that could be looked into as well for universities that want to finance their transition effort. So thank you again for all that, and that's definitely very good insight to take away from. Now that we've sort of covered the first two parts of the discussion, we've understand that finance is an enabler, and it's important for us to explore exactly how can it be leveraged and how that it's actually could be presented in different ways. It could be a financial instrument, or it could also be through partnerships or different sorts of business models. And there's also, other unique things to look into, such as cap and trade system and other standards to also refer to. But now that we've coming to the end of our discussion, maybe we can focus on the transition to a green campus itself, and what does it actually take to achieve a green campus. So let's delve into that topic now. But before we go into that, I'd just like to remind the audience that if you have any questions, please feel free to type in the Zoom chat box or the live chat on YouTube and Facebook. We'll be happy to answer your question after our discussion. And if you even have questions in the discussion paper, we'll be happy to clarify anything that you guys have. So now again, let's delve into what does it actually take to achieve a green campus. And I think for most people today, they've heard a lot of terminologies being thrown around to define sustainability. We've said net zero, we've said carbon neutral. Maybe Dr. Fong, if you could just help define and explain what does these terms actually mean? What does carbon neutral mean? What does net zero mean? And what does it actually constitute achieving a green campus?
Okay, sure. But because these terms, I truly agree, because these terms are often used interchangeably. So sometimes there might be some confusion, but they have distinct meanings. So please allow me to share this screen. so that you can have a better look at. Yeah. So these are the three key terms that we have, that more or less I've been using throughout today's sharing. So first of all, carbon neutral means that you have a balance between emitting carbon and absorbing carbon from the atmosphere in carbon sinks. So what does it mean in simple terms? It means that how are you able to balance your carbon emission with offsets? So so maybe for those that are new to this landscape, so in all the activities that we do, we will have a certain portion of emissions coming from our activities. So and of course, if we look into how the greenhouse gas analytics is, they are actually categorized according to scope 1, 2, and 3, meaning that they have direct emissions, indirect emissions, and also emissions along the value chain. But to put it simple, whatever activity that we do constricted to our boundaries of activities, they will emit emissions. And those emissions are usually accounted as carbon because we are concerned of climate change. And climate change is largely attributed to greenhouse gases, and carbon are actually one of the most, it's sort of like a unit used to measure emissions. So basically, how much are you emitting and how are you going to offset those sort of emissions? So bringing it back to a neutral level. So things that we can do are, for example, tree planting or purchasing renewable energy credits. So those are the things that we can actually help to achieve carbon neutrality. So on the other hand, net zero means cutting greenhouse gas emissions close to zero as possible, and with any remaining emissions are reabsorbed from the atmosphere through carbon sequestration. So in simple terms, what does it mean is that net zero is one step further from carbon neutrality. So carbon neutrality is looking at how we can offset or make the scale balance. And net zero is going one step further to aiming to eliminate all the emissions at source through deep decarbonization tech. And with only those residual emissions that are not able to be tackled, then we offset those emissions. But I would also like to bring your attention to one more term, which is just net zero. So in this sense, so if we look at earlier two definitions, they are entirely talking about how we can address our emissions. But just net zero is something that we would like to add on to the effort of net zero, is that how can we achieve net zero by also considering the justice issues of socio-economic welfare? Because we need to acknowledge that the capability to decarbonize emissions differentiates from one entity to another, because all organizations or activities have their coping mechanisms and it's not the same. So with that in mind, it's also very important that we also consider this when we are trying to strive for net zero. How can we also not leave anyone behind? So so this will also help to sort of carve a more reliable climate adaptation down the road. Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Fong. So in terms of this definition, obviously they are part of UM's plan, but how exactly does UM plan to or envisions to achieve this, and what measures are in place to achieve this goal?
Okay. I think what I can also share, let me share this also. I think this is a very nice diagram that I have. Okay, this is the second page. So earlier in my sharing, I actually shared that Universiti Malaya is in a very unique position. It's sandwiched in between the capital city of Kuala Lumpur and also the district of Petaling Jaya. So what I'm showing you here is an aerial view of Universiti Malaya. And most of the time, whenever we go around to share stories about a sustainable success story, we will always share this photo here. So we are really situated at the heart of Kuala Lumpur and Petaling Jaya. If you look at the diagram of this boundary, it's exactly like a heart shape. If you are familiar with the anatomy of a heart, it exactly shows the shape of a heart. So, and if you compare if you look at this diagram here, you can also see that Universiti Malaya is actually very green compared to the vicinities. So and that's also why we have and how would I put it? I think green campus is not just meaning that it's a carbon efficient campus. It's one that really actively enhance the well-being of its community and ecosystem through a lot of efforts, through energy efficient infrastructure, through clean transport, through circular waste management, and also campus culture that is deeply rooted in environmental responsibility. So at Universiti Malaya, what we do, as I shared the three documents earlier, so those are sort of our guiding principles. And the one that's coming very soon is on the net zero blueprint. So net zero blueprint is actually very closely tied to the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network Net Zero Campus Guidelines. So it's a mouthful. Perhaps later I'll just type it in the chat box so that you can catch it again. So, and currently what we are doing here under SDC is that we are championing accelerating net zero projects. So these are coordinated under SDC, and I'm actually overseeing this the implementation of these projects. So to lay out this vision, projects such as the detailed greenhouse gas inventory. So we are also doing that. How we can scale up solar PV systems adoption across the campus universities. How can we transition to low carbon commuting strategies such as adopting EVs, adopting electric trams for internal travels and such. And also, we are currently looking into investment in nature-based solutions like green roofs and ecological corridors. So this is just a glimpse into what we are doing currently under SDC. And if you're really interested to know more, I really urge you all to head over to our website to take a look closer to the amount of success story that we have. I think I can just quickly plug this number. We currently have about 40 plus living labs with more than, I think to this stage, because Living Lab has been a staple project for SDC since early 2015. So it's about 10 years now. And I think we have covered up to about 100 projects, various living labs that address various campus sustainability issues. And now we are shaping it in a way that how we can collectively work more strategically into accelerating the net zero efforts in Universiti Malaya. Yeah, I'll stop here.
Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Fong. I think one thing that can be taken away, just in general, not only for universities but for institutions as well, is kind of the integrated approach that UM has, which is first to set up, the guiding principles through the blueprints, and then to have one main document to sort of summarize all the different actions that need to come together in order to achieve the one goal, which is to potentially maybe carbon neutral or in the future net zero, as well as to have that research arm at the same time to look into different kind of solutions. For example, in UM, the innovation labs, to further accelerate solutions in order for us to meet the green goal. So I think that integrated approach of having a research arm, having the guiding principles through the blueprint, and also having a master plan that touches on each area to meet the eventual net zero or carbon neutral goal is a very interesting approach that can be taken away for other institutions, not only universities. So maybe Dr. Ella, now if I could hear from yourself, what would you consider is the most critical factor to address, and how can a green campus be successfully achieved?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Fong. Just now, you just like come up with the nice tech backgrounds, like plan of UM. So it's really nice, but I don't have to share with anything with that. All right, now first of all, okay, I would say let's start with the financial side. Okay, so because as we know, nothing move without funding. Okay, that's fact, right? So universities need to go with the creative when it comes with the financial sustainability projects. Okay, at UM, for instance, there is a real push to issues with the green sukuk, and it's not just an idea; it's inspired by the global successes. Okay, next is energy. Okay, one biggest area for the improvements for that any campuses. Okay, most universities building were designed a decade ago and were not built in the sustainabilities in mind that you should be on mind. So retrofitting is a key. Okay, we need to retrofit everything. Okay, at UM, they're making a great stride by the upgrading the old building. Okay, and things like improving the lighting, air conditioning, and the installations, okay, and so on, extra. So this is a huge difference. Okay, basically, if you could see, there is a huge difference, but not at all. UM also, integrating the renewable energy like solar panels, as I said earlier, and taking advantage on the green electricity tariff. This effort just help not only that help the environment, okay, it's also like save money in for long run. Plus the monitoring system, as I said earlier, the building energy intensity system, yeah, so that is able to track, optimize the energy and usage more effectively. Okay, next talk about the transport. Okay, the transportations is surprisingly the big emitters of the campuses. Even within a small area, transportation can have a huge environmental footprint. Okay, so to tackle this, UM's moving towards more sustainable mobility options. As I mentioned earlier, is the EV buggies to reduce the emissions. Okay, but it's not cheap. Okay, it doesn't stop there as well. Okay, encouraging, you know, ride sharing and improving the last, mile public transport. Okay, access, also like critical steps. Okay, UM's goal is to cut transport emissions by, as I said, 20%. So, and while it's an ambitious target, and it is definitely necessary for that, creating a greener campus. Okay, I would say that. Okay, next, waste management. Okay, it's more than just as throwing things in the, right bins. Successful green campuses means is setting a clear measurements targets, and yet they are pushing for the initiative like bioplastics, as I said, to replace the single-use plastic, creating that upcycling stations, okay, and even establishing the reuse hubs, okay, where the student can donate, okay. If you can see that, you can see in the entrance there in our campus. So they set up that the hubs to just donate, the used things like the clothes, shoes, and many things like bags and so on. All right. So this is creating the, the student, donating stuff or swap the items and so on. Okay, so this is about the building circular economy on campus, and it's about changing the way we think about the waste and make sure the campus communities is actively involved, in reducing, reusing, and recycling. Okay, okay.
Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Elia. And I think those recommendations for UM are very aligned with what's within the blueprints and plans already. But maybe if you could also share, what other policies that have been implemented in Malaysia or globally, and how have these policies been successfully implemented to achieve the particular goals? So maybe some active policies that we can also draw on.
Okay, thank you. Okay, basically, we see Malaysia has already made some strong move in drive the sustainability. So, take the national climate change, NCCP 2.0, for example. These policies, like, really emphasize a whole of the society approach, aiming the unite, everyone in the transitions to the slow, the low carbon economy. And it's not just a talk anyway. Okay, it's just not a talk. Malaysia took real action in 2017 by issuing the world first green sukuk to fund the solar energy projects. Okay. In addition to that, the low carbon cities frameworks by Malaysian Green Technologies Corporations. Okay, NGTC, I guess. Okay, they encourage both cities and campuses to reduce that emissions in a measurable way. For example, the universities, for universities, they are also like a significant push from the Minister of the Higher Education, where they now require universities to adopt the environmental, social, and governance (ESG) policies, which is steering us towards that 2030 SDG agenda. Okay, on the global stage, okay, there are some important frameworks that guide institutions are like aim for the sustainability. So most of our familiars with the Paris Agreement, okay, earlier said. So which is set the target of the keeping global warming below 1.5. So So data sizes. So, however, what matters even more, how we interpret and implement the commitments in the real life. So you have to look into it. Okay, then the Asian Green Bond Standards and ICMA, Green Bond principles. These provide the clear structures on how the fund green projects responsibility. A great example is, as I said earlier, the National University of Singapore's about the net zero buildings. So that's one of the examples I could given for this. Okay, and of course we cannot forget about United Nations Sustainability Development Goals. So on specifically the SDG 7, okay, clean energy, and then the SDG 11 on the sustainable gas, and then the SDG on 13, which is climate actions. So this global goals is like reshaping, how we all work towards on more sustainable futures. So now look at what university like doing, bring of this to life. So what really impressive how integrate local and global policy into real association plans. First, energy efficiencies. is upgrading the building energy intensities through the systems. So in order to make more older structures perform better, and they're also like rolling out the solar panels, through that the renewable energy installation frameworks. Next, mobility, the EV cars, as I said, which is transport and using the AI powered traffic systems. So that is another things. Waste systems, as I said, the bioplastics, free single use plastics and so on, and we setting up the reuse hubs as well, and then the carbon offsets. So is exploring that, as I said, cap and trade systems, which is really help to track the emissions and incentive further reductions of the carbon output, and then sustainable financing. So one of the most exciting things in developments of the green success frameworks. So these are the things, all right, like when we consider. So, but the real questions, how do we make this works? So it lies on the executions. For example, stakeholder engagements. So stakeholder engagements, and then we also look into data integrations. And then the transparency reporting. So which like transparency, if you can see that transparency is like keys, which is published regular sustainability report is very good. And as third parties audits to validate their progress, this builds a trust and credibility, and especially when it's come to the green financings. So, and then the last one is like, the public-private partnerships, like joint venture with the TNBs, solar projects. So it's help makes the large scale of an initiative more financially viable and scalable. I would say that, so these are the points, maybe probably, we engage both through the strong local policies, the globally recognized frameworks, and what left now is the executions, and the university like are in the perfect positions to lead the way. These are my side points. Last times.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Dr. Leah, for your feedback. And I think is quite important, as you highlighted, the alignment to those national standards as well as international conventions. But again, also to take a whole of society approach, obviously, supply chain and the larger stakeholder groups that will be involved in, or any institution will be involved in, would also need to be considered in its sustainability plan. And that's something that would also is very important to be integrated into policy. So now that we've heard from both our speakers, Dr. Elayaraja and also Dr. Fong, we can now move to the Q&A session. So again, to all of the participants on Zoom, on Facebook, on YouTube, you can just type in your questions in the chat box, and we'll address them one at a time. So we already have a few questions in. Again, thank you all participants for sending those in. So let me just go to the first question that we have. Now, one of our viewers asked knowing that universities and government agencies, they have a role in improving sustainability, because again, these institutions, they can regulate their procurement process, for example, and require businesses that supply or work with the university or government agency in terms of what they need to report on, especially particularly in this case, their sustainability effort, and to ensure that the information is available for the university or the government agencies auditing or verification. So in this view, I think that the participants are asking of the supply chain side of universities and government institutions, how are small and medium enterprises being integrated or looked at, particularly in terms of the procurement process, knowing that for these SMEs, in order for them to verify their sustainability effort, it would be quite costly. Would universities require SMEs to show that they are green, for example? And if not, what is the university stance or public institution stance on requiring sustainable reporting from SMEs that provide service to the university or the government agency? So I think this question, what we can try and discuss is, how does green procurement fit into institutions planning for sustainability, as well as maybe to larger scale, how does small medium enterprises how are they interacting with university sustainability plan? I think maybe we can go to Dr. Fong first.
Okay. I'll try my very best to provide how to put it, a good answer to that very thoughtful question. I think that's a very thoughtful question. And considering the sustainability efforts that we want to carry out in Malaya, of course, we have to look along the value chain. But currently, what I would like to share is that I don't think, to my knowledge, Malaya does not yet require formal sustainability disclosures from SMEs yet. So this is primarily to avoid placing undue administrative or financial burdens on small businesses, because we also know that they are not ready to be, to submit in this sort of report, which adheres to our sustainability reporting. So, and of course, we also acknowledge that many of these businesses, small businesses especially, are still navigating the basic compliance requirement. But from our side, we also recognize that the growing importance of integrating these sustainability principles into the full value chain, including vendors and tenants that are associated with Universiti Malaya's operation. So currently, under the coordination of UMSDC, we are also working with very closely with our procurement and the development offices to progressively incorporate sustainability criteria into our vendor evaluation processes. So, for example, rather than imposing very complex reporting at the outset, so our approach is more according to phase, and it's also meant to capacity build on the long run. So meaning that we are also working very closely with our vendors, with our tenants, in a way that this is something that we want to head to in the future in terms of sustainability, and these are the ways that you can actually help from the tenants or vendors operation, day-to-day operation, how they can actually help us to move into that. So for example, things that we have already some of the things that we have looked into is, for example, offer green procurement guidelines. So we have already set in line how we can ensure that the vendors that are coming in are much more green in their sense. We also introduce incentives for businesses that adopt sustainability practices. For example, let's say cafeteria vendors that are using, they are phasing out single-use plastics. They are using biodegradable packaging, for example. So we do have some sort of incentive mechanism to support those good practices. Of course, down the road, we will look into the possibility of coming up with simple ESG self-declaration forms. It's possible. But of course, nothing is confirmed at the moment. But it's not that far from looking much more closely into materializing it, because at the end of the day, the long-term goal here is to align the supply chain with our sustainability target. So at the same time, we are also supporting SMEs on their transition journey. So this is sort of like a it goes both ways, not just how we can ensure that SMEs help us in our sustainability journey, but we are also helping these SMEs to capacity build them in order that if, let's say, they no longer want to serve Universiti Malaya, for example, at least they are equipped with the basic requirement or knowledge on what they can do because I believe ESG reporting is going to be something that is common wherever they go. So and as long as they are part of the supply chain, they will be required to some sort of report their part of their ESG as well to help. So so we see this part as our sort of our institutional responsibility. Of course, SDC is doing our part, and we will never be able to do this if we are not supported by the top management as well. Because this is part of our the Universiti Malaya's responsibility to ensure that the sustainability that we are talking about is really inclusion throughout the whole Universiti Malaya's ecosystem, be it our students, our staffs, our community, or even beyond Universiti Malaya's community. Yeah. So that's sort of like the quick question, quick response to that question just now.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Fong. And I think with regards to SMEs, particularly, even if we look at other sort of sustainable finance reporting frameworks or criteria, for example, the Indonesian taxonomy for sustainable finance, even the Philippine taxonomy for sustainable finance, both of those kind of frameworks or documents on sustainable reporting, they have specific approaches for SMEs. So I think that is the trend that would go on in terms of there would be catered guidelines for SMEs that are more simplified for them to assess their sustainability. And what we can see from the Philippines and Indonesia case, for example, both of those frameworks use guiding principles, meaning that they understand, the difficulty with SMEs is that they're not able to capture as much data because that is obviously something that is quite costly. But they set up these principles that these SMEs can use to assess themselves against. So again, I think the idea here is that SMEs are being taught, they are being integrated into the approach, but we also understand the disadvantages that SMEs have, and that can be addressed through, for example, right now, for example, in it's more of encouraging green practices. But again, there are frameworks being worked on, for example, in Indonesia and Thailand, to provide more simplified guidance for SMEs. Because again, in order to completely achieve net zero or the sustainability goals that we have, there needs to be also a consideration of the supply chain, which does involve SMEs. And particularly in ASEAN, it is the backbone of our economy. So we do have a few more questions here. So let me just go to the next one. So we have one question that asks, how can campuses, especially public universities, future-proof their green financing strategies to adapt to rapidly changing environmental regulations or technologies? So I think this is a very relevant question because even in most of the sustainability documents that we've discussed today, they've been revised and updated from time to time. And we've talked about the difficulty of receiving financing because of the timeline, the lifetime of projects. So maybe Dr. Fong, if you could just speak on how can campuses future-proof their green financing strategies, considering the changing nature of the topics that are at hand.
Okay. I mean, to answer that, I think at the very top we need to acknowledge that the landscape nowadays is very complex, and true enough that as much as we talk about how we should be much more climate resilient and climate adaptive, by using, let's say, for example, nature-based solutions, by prioritizing nature-based solutions, we are seeing a lot of failing of this sort of climate projects, and that's because of how complex the situation that we are currently in. So to talk about future proofing, I think we need to there are a few perhaps keywords that I would suggest that we need to think about. So first of all is flexibility. Second word could be foresight, and perhaps the third keyword that I would use is partnership. So these are the three important things that I believe are the key ingredients to ensuring that green finance, for example, can be future-proof. So for us to future-proof a green finance, according to the question, it would require a flexible, adaptive, and evidence-based approach. I'm sure of that. So, like what we are doing in is that, for example, through UMSDC's work, so we are having this sort of living lab pilots. So this serves as sort of like you can say it like a transition period, or it could also be a safe testing bed for you for innovative solutions. So in that sense, we are actually testing the innovative finance link sustainability projects in campus first at a smaller scale. And in that process, as what Dr. Elayaraja has suggested, we need data and data doesn't lie, right? So data would actually provide the actual truth to showcase that if, let's say, a certain sustainability project that is proposed could actually be scaled up to a larger scale, right? And so that would serve as the evidence to if possible to scale, or if it is not successful, it could be it's because it's a living lab. It's meant to be a continuous experimentation process. So what went wrong in the last cycle? What can we adjust to ensure that the failure rate is not that high in a certain sustainability project? So by adjusting that sort of direction, we can actually sort of future-proof projects that are linked to these green finance. So that's one. So other than that, I think it's also important because I mentioned about foresight. So scenario planning is equally important in the sense that because like I said, we are living in a very complex world nowadays. So we need to anticipate different type of scenarios basically scenarios where this sort of scenarios will actually help us to carve our policy or regulatory needs in a sense that, for example, how can we adjust the carbon pricing according to this sort of scenario? And if, let's say, if scenario A is not that promising, perhaps we can move to scenario B. And under scenario B, what would be the pricing mechanism look like? And so on, so forth, so on and so forth. So with this sort of different scenario planning, and I also believe that Dr. Elayaraja mentioned about Monte Carlo simulation. So this is sort of like an evidence-based, and we are backing up these sort of solutions with a lot of data. So we're talking about huge chunk of data to ensure that we do look into the various possibility of scenario and how do we choose the best scenario to work in. And of course, lastly, I would think it's also important that we acknowledge that we don't put all the eggs in one basket, right? So we need a sort of like a various funding strategies rather than relying on one type of fund. Perhaps we can look into blended finance, combining, let's say, government grants, public-private partnership grants, and potentially even we can even look into carbon-linked revenue streams as well. Because Universiti Malaya, like I said, we have a lot of potential, especially in how we are able to perhaps one day we'll be able to move into the carbon credit arena. Not sure yet, but it seems promising because look at how green we are and also the various type of green energy, renewable energy initiatives that we are also taking up. So so in short, again, to recap, that 3 keywords that I would suggest to future-proof green finance would be to look into, to have flexibility, to have a clear direction, to have a glimpse into what the future holds in terms of foresighting, and also to have a good strategic partnership to ensure that the failure rate is as low as possible.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you again, Dr. Fong. I definitely agree with those 3 key insights that you shared. I think particularly we also see in various documents, sustainable finance documents, that there is a recommendation for revision periods to be built in. So for example, most of the time to achieve sustainable finance, you have to set those indicators. Those indicators then would be set in smaller batches of periods, where in between the periods, the performance indicators could be adjusted depending on the environmental situation. Because again, most of the things that we're working with is future modeling that could be changed depending on the nature of technology or the environment at the time. So I think another thing that we could also look into is building in revision periods in order to actually reflect what is the current situation at. And I think as you said with regards to carbon credits, and that would be the last question for today's session, do you see a larger role with carbon credits and ESG reporting in terms of sustainable financing?
Okay, I wasn't expecting a question on carbon credit. uh, can you repeat the question again?
Just maybe in terms of what do you see is the role of carbon credits in terms of financing sustainability initiatives?
Carbon credits and okay. Um, I think that when we talk about carbon credits, it's also somehow linked to sustainability report and ESG report also. And carbon credits would sort of be a key defining role, especially for the E section for under the performance sector, performance indicator under this E environmental part, because companies that are having a lot of emissions will definitely find a way to actually either they achieve carbon neutrality, or in a more extreme scenario they have to go net zero. So so definitely that's going to influence a lot the role of university um, in shaping university. And because, like I said, university plays an important role in the ecosystem. And when I say ecosystem, it's not just the higher education ecosystem alone. It's about how university plays a role in shaping talent, developing innovative solutions, and also playing a key role in advising ministries or even key stakeholders in making policies and guidelines that will definitely shape the outcome of how the carbon credit landscape will be in Malaysia. So, so I think what we are currently doing here, I mean, things that I can share off definitely is that UM is currently developing this campus-wide carbon inventory, and I'm sort of leading that end of that project where we are looking into the greenhouse gas analytics to have a very good understanding of what is our emission standards. So we have started this project since 2 years ago in 2022. And the idea here is that how does this carbon inventory or greenhouse gas inventory helps us to set our pace in our net zero journey? Because in the earlier slides, I've also shared with you, we have a mission of going net zero by 2050. And before that, we are trying to go carbon neutral by 2030. So by having this sort of baseline, it's very important. And I believe in this, in the near future, we envision the possibility of participating in carbon offset schemes, especially tied to nature-based solutions or green infrastructure. So like I shared with you, we have a very green forest reserve here in Universiti Malaya, and we're also looking into all sorts of green infrastructure moving forward. So it's also possible that we can build capacity to issue or trade institutional carbon credits via verified projects. So it could be through solar rooftops, or it could be through afforestation zones, following these, of course, following the guidelines that the international standards are following. So if I also may share what we are currently working on is that we are also working on ESG reporting. So some of the audience here today might be thinking like, ESG and higher education institute is something that they might not have think about in the first place, because when we talk about ESG reporting, the first thing that comes into place is that it's commonly in the corporate world, because you need to report to your stakeholders, your funders, etc. But we also believe that if we look at how Universiti Malaya is as an higher education institute, so the modus operandi or the day-to-day operation does not fluctuate too much from another business out there. So we believe that universities, especially as one of the premier university in Malaysia, we must lead by example. So currently, what UMSDC is doing is that we are exploring an internal ESG reporting framework. So especially in relations to ethical investment policies, social equity in campus services, and also governance, transparency, and sustainability planning. So I can only hint as much as now. There's a lot of work that we are currently into. But all I would like to say is that ultimately all this, they are integrating we are integrating all of this into one financial architecture in the end that will not only strengthen the accountability of of Universiti Malaya, it will also help to unlock new funding pathway where we can actually look at the partnership with development banks or ESG funds or even impact-driven partners, so as to say that the green finance part could actually really materialize under this sort of guidance on the documents that I've shared earlier. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Fong. I think there's a lot of insights that are still going on, and obviously, again, everything is quite nascent. So things are still being explored and researched on, and that's something that UMSDC and UM in general is looking towards. And with that, I hope that everyone here on Facebook, on YouTube, with us on Zoom have had a great time and had taken away some insights with regards to our panel discussion. We have come to the end with actually slightly longer than our allocated event time, but it was a great discussion with yourself, Dr. Fong, and Dr. Elayaraja, who has had leave because he does have another class. But again, thank you so much, Dr. Fong and Dr. Elayaraja, for participating in this panel discussion, and thank you to UMSDC for helping organize this great online panel discussion. And thank you as well to all of our participants for participating in the Q&A session and listening to some of the insights from our discussion paper, as well as from the panel discussion on the role of Science Finance to transition to a green campus. Now, for those of you on Zoom, you can refer to the chat box in regards to how you can get your e-certification. And you can refer to the screen where you can scan the QR code to fill out the attendance and feedback form. And this will again help you claim your e-certificate by completing the form by scanning the QR code on the screen now. With that, we'll bring the event to a close. And again, thank you so much to everyone who have today to participate with this event. If you'd like to hear more about the sustainability efforts in UM, feel free to visit our website, UM at Sustainability, and looking forward to see some of you at tomorrow's event as well. Have a good day.
Thank you, Aqmal. Thank you, everyone. Bye.